Boa tarde, todo mundo. Mais de 10 mil pessoas se inscreveram para essa entrevista de hoje. E não é para menos. Nós temos um enorme prazer de ter aqui conosco ela, que com a sua forma de explicar o autismo, mudou a forma como o autismo é entendido no mundo. Diferente, não menos, o mundo precisa de todos os tipos de mente. Ela sempre diz. Dr. Temple Grandin é cientista, professora de ciência animal da Universidade do Colorado, ativista do autismo, inspiração para mim, para o Gustavo, para milhares de pessoas no mundo inteiro. Ela já foi eleita uma das 100 pessoas mais influentes do mundo pela revista Time. E hoje, olha que privilégio, ela está aqui com a gente. Muito obrigada, Temple, por aceitar esse nosso convite.
It's wonderful, wonderful to be here.
Então, vamos começar, né? Que a gente já tem muita pergunta aí para você. Primeiro, eu queria lembrar todo mundo que amanhã é o seu aniversário, Temple. Você faz 73 anos. Como é que é olhar para a sua jornada e ver que você é essa inspiração para todo mundo? Do que você sente mais orgulho?
Well, I'm very proud that I'm helping to inspire a lot of young people. I've had still have a long career in the cattle industry. In fact, I've designed cattle handling corrals in Brazil. But today, I want to encourage young people. And there's a lot of young people that are different. When I was working on these very big construction projects, I worked with drafting people, design people, machinery designers, and welders that were probably either autistic, dyslexic, or ADHD. I estimate that 20% of the people I worked with on building some of these big projects were kids that would be in special ed. And one of the problems we've had problems in my country with the schools, is in some of the schools, they have removed all of the hands-on classes, art, welding, shop, auto mechanics, theater, sewing, cooking, all of these hands-on things that can turn into good careers. And the people that I worked with would have taken the hands-on classes because there's many careers. And I'm seeing too many kids today that should have a good job, maybe being an auto mechanic, maybe being a programmer in Silicon Valley. And I've been to the large tech companies in what we call Silicon Valley. Half the programmers probably have mild autism. That's why we have technology that we're using today. It probably came from the autistic brain. And we got to help these kids that are different to develop specialized skills that society needs, like programming computers, playing music, acting, art, auto mechanics, journalism. There's a lot of different fields.
Dr. Grandin, inicio minha participação conduzindo a minha primeira pergunta para a questão das emoções. O famoso neurologista Oliver Sacks, em um dos livros, tem um capítulo dedicado à sua pessoa. E lá é colocado o teu sentimento de como se sentisse uma antropóloga em Marte. Né? Para nós, a expressão peixe fora d'água. Esse sentimento ainda acontece? Está presente ainda esse sentimento?
Well, in some situations it do, but in human beings, there's a lot of variation. And when the brain is being formed, the brain can form either to be more social and emotional, or the brain can form to be more thinking and about doing things. And a certain amount of this is just normal variation. Now, obviously, a child who never learns to talk, that's a severe disability. But there's a big variation. And what I have done in my life is I've replaced emotional complexity with thinking complexity. Like at lunch, I'm going to read my science and nature magazines. Those are my recreational reading because I love learning about new things. So there's some emotional things I don't do, but there's other things I do better. And remember, this technology that we are using today comes from people that are so fascinated and fixated on computers that they're making Zoom. They're making all the different technologies that we have. So there's a need in society for both kinds of minds. And this is why I want to emphasize, develop the child's strengths. The skills will be uneven. The kid may be good at art. Maybe he's good at math. If he's good at math, develop the math. Allow the young child to take advanced math. Or maybe he's a child that loves to fix motorcycles. Well, he's going to have a career fixing cars and motorcycles. So it's really important to expose them to a lot of things so you can find out what they're good at. And the child that likes engines is going to really love engines. But we need people to fix vehicles. See, this is why the world needs to have all of the different kinds of minds.
Com certeza.
Muito bem. E Temple, você teve acesso a terapias desde muito cedo, né? Desde muito nova. A sua mãe, de quem eu sou grande fã também, teve muita atenção a isso. Como que a intervenção precoce ajudou você na infância, nos desafios da infância?
Early intervention is extremely important. I had no speech until age 4. At age 2.5, I went into a very good speech therapy early intervention with a lot of one-to-one teaching of language. My speech teacher would hold up a cup like this, and she would say cup. And she'd say it cup the regular way, and then she'd say cup where she sounded it out. And you have to give the child time to respond. Their processing speed is slow. Another thing that was done for my early intervention was a lot of emphasis on turn-taking games. These children have to learn how to wait and take their turn at a game. So I had extremely good early education. The worst thing you can do with a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old who's not talking is to let them watch television all day or play with phones all day. That's the worst thing you can do. You've got to work with these little kids. And they need a lot of one-on-one. And if you're in a place where there's no services, there's a lot of grandmothers that know how to work with little kids. And they need to just start trying to play a little game with the child and engage them. And then start trying to get them to talk. If you know a child knows the word for juice, then you need to say to them, use your words. And then you have to give them time to respond. Some of these children, they're like a phone with really poor mobile phone service. You have to give it time to download a web page.
Perfect. Yeah, é isso mesmo.
Ótimo. Ótimas dicas. Temple, desde a época do seu diagnóstico, quando recebeu ainda nova, até hoje, muito mudamos em termos de critérios de diagnóstico. Já tivemos outras edições, né, dos manuais normativos. Na sua opinião, acha que evoluímos nos critérios de diagnóstico?
Well, the problem with an autism diagnosis, it's a behavioral profile. There is no laboratory test. You can get a test for COVID and you know you have it or you do not. You can test for tuberculosis. You either have it or you do not. Autism is a continuous trait, from a computer scientist who's not very social with a very good job making technology to somebody who remains nonverbal and cannot dress themselves or take a shower by themselves. It's a very, very big range. Now, the most important thing, if you have little children, 2, 3, 4 years old that are not talking, you must start working with them. Worst thing you can do with a child with no speech is nothing. I don't care what the diagnosis is. He has no speech and his behavior is really weird. You've got to start working with them now. Now, when the child starts to talk, kids with autism have to learn social skills almost like being in a play. So my mother used a method called Teachable Moments. So if we were sitting at the dining room table and I took my finger and stirred a drink, Mother did not scream no. She gave the instruction. The instruction was to use the spoon. When the child does something wrong, like maybe eating mashed potatoes with his hands, you give the instruction, use the spoon. The mistake that people make is just screaming no.
É exatamente isso. E Tempo, nós temos aqui entre nós, né, como eu te falei, tem mais de 10 mil pessoas assistindo, temos muitas mães que acabaram de receber o diagnóstico do filho, muitos pais, né? Quando a gente recebe esse diagnóstico, a primeira coisa que fazemos é estudar, pesquisar, e acabamos encontrando várias linhas diferentes de terapia. Diante de tantas linhas diferentes, qual a melhor a se escolher? O que você diria para esses pais?
One of the most important things is the method in your town that has the best teacher. I have observed many good teachers working with different methods. It might be labeled ABA or floor time or Denver START model or some other name. And good teachers do the same things regardless of the name of the method. A good teacher with very young children knows how to engage. You have to push a little bit to engage, but they have to be careful not to cause the child to go into sensory overload and just start screaming. So what I want to do is talk to other parents where you live and find out who has the best program that has good outcomes. They get their children talking. So locally, maybe one program in this town works really well, but maybe over in another town, it's a bad program because the teachers are bad. You know, I can't emphasize enough the importance of good teaching. Little kids require 20 hours a week of one-to-one teaching to get speech going and to get the talking started and to get basic skills such as getting dressed, using the toilet, bathing. We need to eating with utensils. We've got to teach these basic skills. And then later on, after we've taught the basic skills, the child might be good at art. Maybe he's good at music. Maybe he's good at math. I want to develop the thing that the child is good at doing. Some children are visual thinkers like me. If you watch the HBO movie Temple Grandin, it shows exactly how I think. But there's other children with autism that are good at math. So you can get a visual thinker like me, or you can get a mathematical thinker. I am not a mathematical thinker. And then you can get the child who's good with words, loves history, and knows every soccer score, every soccer player or football player. He's a word person. Take the thing that they're good at and build on it, because that can turn into a career later on in life.
Parte dessas características a gente vai ancorando todo um planejamento de terapia, seja dentro ou fora do consultório. E você trouxe, né, que os avós podem se envolver ali no ensino da fala. Sua mãe teve um papel importante também para que aprendesse algumas instruções, e ampliando isso para outros familiares, como os irmãos, por exemplo. Muitas famílias se preocupam em como esses irmãos vão estabelecer seus relacionamentos. E você tem 3 irmãos mais novos. Como é que foi esse relacionamento com seus irmãos?
Well, one thing, my mother put a lot of emphasis on with working with me, a lot of emphasis. but it's important to not leave the siblings out. My sister was very talented in art and theater, and mother did do some theater activities with my sister, but the siblings need to have some time. Now, again, autism is a very broad spectrum. By the time I was 6, we could do normal activities like church, go eat at a restaurant. Now, there are some individuals with autism where it's very severe. And if you go to a restaurant, he's just going to be screaming. You see, the problem is you've got a very big spectrum. You have a child that's a mild end of the spectrum, you can do most family events. And then you may have another child that can't tolerate them. Now, one of the problems with some people on the autism spectrum is noise sensitivity. They get into noisy, big family gatherings. That it's like being in a really loud factory, and their sensory system just gets completely overloaded. So when we went to family gatherings, one of the houses that I visited had a big long hallway with a mirror in it. And after lunch, I was allowed to run down that hall, and then I could watch myself in the mirror as I ran down the hall. Thought that was fun. Or maybe they'd be a place they could go outside. But, you know, the autistic kid may need a place to get away. In my grandmother's house, there was a spare bedroom, and she had some special little toys that I could play with, you know, while the rest of the family was in the living room talking. So these are things that can be worked out. But sensory, if the child screams in a crowded place, that's due to noise. But different kids with autism are different. One child may tolerate the big noisy party, another child does not. Now, or you may have a sound they don't like a car horn honking. Well, one of the best ways to get them over that is to take them out in the car and let the child honk the horn, where they control it. And when they can control honking the horn, turning on a vacuum cleaner, that would be another one, where they get to play with the vacuum cleaner, they control it. Turn a hairdryer on and off, where they control it. Then they may actually get to like it and get somewhat desensitized to that noise. But the mistake that's often made is a child's allowed to wear headphones all the time. And the problem, if you do that, is that the ear gets more sensitive, the brain gets more sensitive. Now, the child can always have the headphones with them. Have them with you. So if you need them, you can wear them. But then you try not to wear them. Again, giving the child some control. And then if you do that, you can sometimes desensitize some of the sound sensitivity. But there's other individuals that sometimes are just going to need breaks away from really big, noisy things.
Perfeito, Temple. E eu acho que é interessante você falar desses desafios, porque talvez agora você estivesse se sentindo confortável de alguma forma com o mundo, aí vem uma Covid, né? Vem a quarentena. Como foi adaptar a sua rotina? Quais foram os desafios que você enfrentou? E como é que está a sua vida hoje? O que mudou?
All my travel was canceled. Up until this time, I was on a plane, maybe 3 different cities in 1 week, doing talks on cattle and doing talks on autism, all canceled. Now, one thing that helped me, I have been in the construction industry. I spent 25 years in the construction industry. And one of the things you learn in the construction industry is you have to get projects done. You have to be decisive and do things. So the first thing I did is I called my computer guy. I've got a really good computer person. And I said, help. And he went to the store and bought the last stuff that was in the store. We had to get set up. My background in construction, where you are forced to move quickly when things go wrong on projects, that helped me. Another thing that helped me is the schedule. And I made myself get up in the morning, every morning, showered, dressed for work by 8 o'clock. That's important. No pajamas, no sleepwear, dressed for work. Have a schedule. And I do my writing in the morning. I'm writing a new book now on visual thinking. And because now I have time to do the writing.
E você ainda faz os seus 100 abdominais todos os dias, como eu já ouvi você falando?
Yes, I still do the exercises because and when I got into puberty, I had terrible problems with anxiety, and strong exercise helped. If I don't do the 100 sit-ups every day, I can't sleep. Now, it took me 6 months to get up to 100 sit-ups. Now, in my book, Thinking in Pictures, which I think is available in Portuguese, there's a chapter in there where I describe my anxiety problems, and I describe my successful treatment of that with antidepressant medication. And even though that chapter is 25 years old, the information is still accurate. Antidepressant medication saved me. When I was in my 20s, I had horrible colitis attacks. That's why the movie showed me eating yogurt and Jell-O. And when I went on the antidepressants in my early 30s, it stopped the constant panic attacks. Now, you have to be very careful with the dose. If you give too high a dose of a drug such as Prozac, that's fluoxetine, or Zoloft, which is sertraline, too high a dose will cause agitation and insomnia, lack of sleep. I'm taking a starter dose of an old-fashioned antidepressant, tricyclic antidepressant, but I know other people on the spectrum that have had good results with a very low dose of Prozac, fluoxetine, maybe 15 milligrams a day, 20 milligrams a day, a starter dose or less. I cannot emphasize enough the importance of the low dose, because I've seen many individuals where a low dose worked, they raised the dose, and it was completely terrible. I don't think I'd be here today without antidepressant medication, and the reason why I have to drink all this water is due to the drug. But that is a side effect that I can tolerate.
E aproveitar então esse gancho que foi mencionado a dificuldade na sua puberdade. Já li em outras entrevistas sobre o seu relato, né, da dificuldade com as mudanças hormonais na adolescência. Como conseguiu lidar com essas dificuldades?
Started all the panic attacks. Horrible anxiety and panic attacks. Another problem was bullying in school, being called names. And the only place where I had friends was where there was a shared interest. And for me, it was horseback riding, electronics, and model rockets. For another child, it could be music, it could be theater, it could be computer programming. And we need to be controlling the amount of video game use because these kids are getting addicted to it. Now, today in lockdown, there are individuals playing Fortnite where they can talk to the other people playing it. That's a good thing, but not 8 hours a day of it. Maybe an hour or two a day of that, you know, to get some social. But it's now I kind of lost my train of thought. Sorry.
A gente estava falando das dificuldades da adolescência. Dos hormônios.
Okay. Yeah, the hormones were a big problem. And vigorous exercise helped. And studying, I wasn't the least bit interested in studying. But I think it's really important for these kids that are different to get involved with special interest groups where there's a shared interest in something. It could be music. I mean, now COVID's now shut down theater, shut down a lot of music activities. Teenage years were absolutely the worst part of my life. Now, one of the things that was good that happened in my teenage years is I learned how to work. Too many kids are not learning how to work. I went to a special boarding school, and for 3 years, I ran the school's horse barn. I cleaned 9 stalls every day. I fed the horses. I put the horses in and out of the barn. I basically ran a horse barn. Didn't do any studying, But when I look back on this, I learned how to work. And this is a big problem today. These kids are not making the transition to work. And it needs to start with chores in the home for little kids, volunteer jobs, like maybe a church volunteer job. Now, COVID has shut down most of the churches now. But where the kid or the child learns how to do a task outside the home on a schedule. And if all the fully verbal individuals need to get real jobs before they graduate from high school. They need to learn how to work.
Eu acho que você está certíssima, Temple, e eu acho que esse é um problema que a gente vê em todo lugar, né? Em países desenvolvidos como os Estados Unidos, Reino Unido, como no Brasil também. Aqui no Brasil, a estatística é horrorosa. A gente tem 8 em cada 10 autistas fora do mercado de trabalho, né? E eu sinto que a gente, como pais, e até os terapeutas também, a gente ainda tem um papel muito de empurrar essa ação junto aos empreendedores, né? Junto às empresas. Que tipo de ação você acha que a gente poderia fazer para que essa realidade mude, para que as empresas, enfim, os pequenos negócios possam ver na mão de obra do autor um recurso importante e super específico e único para aquele mercado?
Well, a lot of people, you go out to the big tech companies that make computers and make all of the things we do online. Half of those people have mild autism, and they've avoided the label. And they are taught when they're young kids, hands-on. Parents in Silicon Valley restrict electronic use. Also, they teach working skills. We have the same problem in the developed world. There's a tendency for parents to overprotect, and they'll say, poor little Jose has got autism, we'll buy his hamburger for him, or we'll shop for him. No, this child needs to learn how to go up to the counter and order the hamburger. Go into a store and shop. I'm seeing too many cases where there's maybe a student in his teens doing well in school, good student, who has never gone shopping, doesn't know how to do laundry, doesn't know how to do basic skills, because parents get overprotective. Because grandparents come up to me all the time and they discover that they have autism when the grandchildren get diagnosed. But that grandfather had learned how to work. He was delivering papers when he was 11 years old. This is why we've got to start teaching those working skills. The other thing on getting people employed, let's start one employer at a time. In many developing areas, there's lots of little shops. I remember going through a street and looking at little shops, and I was picking out which little shop I might approach for hiring somebody on the spectrum. And you just have to explain to them that, let's say he was rude to a customer. Okay, rude to a customer is too abstract. Well, you have to tell him exactly what he did wrong. You stood this close to a customer and you called them stupid. You know, that's not acceptable. You have to tell them exactly what they did wrong. The customer picked up some fruit in the store and you just jerked it away from them. No, what you should have done is say, please do not touch the fruit. Give that customer the instruction. It's wrong. You don't just grab it from them. So you have to take the person with autism aside and explain to them exactly what they need to do. And what I have found with corporations, there's some corporations hiring a lot of people. In a big corporation, you need to have somebody who's a champion, who wants to make this work. Now, the way I got started in my business designing livestock handling facilities is I simply showed people examples of my work. I sold my work. Here are some of my drawings in my book, Thinking in Pictures. I would show a customer drawings and photographs of finished projects. And they go, oh, wow, we'll hire you. Or if you're a computer programmer, you can show off samples of programming. What I learned was to sell my work instead of myself. The conventional interview process does not work very well. Another way to approach employers is say, we'll give you a free trial, because some of these individuals, they'll take longer to train. There are certain things I cannot do. I cannot multitask. A super busy McDonald's takeout window would be a bad job. Too much multitasking. Another thing that employers get mad about, let's say they showed me how to take apart the French fry machine and clean it, and then a week later expected me to do it and I couldn't do it, they get mad. The problem that I have is I do not remember sequence. So what you need to do, and this is easy, is give them a pilot's checklist for the steps to take the machine apart. This could be a coffee maker too. Same idea. Steps to take the machine apart, the cleaning steps. There'd be 3 checklists, just like you have for big airliners. And then the reassembly steps. And on big airliners, they do the checklist the same way. You've got pre-taxi, pre-takeoff, leaving air traffic control. When you get up to a certain altitude, they put it in chunks. So you'd have take apart, clean, reassemble. Pilot's checklist. It's an easy thing to make. And when I worked in a dairy, fortunately, they had a checklist on the wall with how to set up the milking equipment and clean it. I would have been in trouble without that. But that's an easy thing to do. To just let the child write down a checklist of how to take this machine apart and clean it. Or it could be a checklist for closing out the cash, closing out the money at the end of the day, on the end of a shift. Give them a checklist of the steps for closing out the transactions at the end of the day.
É uma ideia fantástica que a gente usa bastante, né, Ricardo, ou Gustavo, aqui no Brasil.
Com certeza. Eu vou direcionar agora para essa questão do autismo na terceira idade. A gente fala muito do autismo na infância, até porque é um diagnóstico feito na primeira infância. Tem desafios diferentes, doutora, em relação à terceira idade, estando dentro do espectro do autismo?
Well, again, you have all levels of autism. When children are very little, age 2 and 3, I looked really severe. I looked really bad. But with a lot of therapy, that got me talking, and they kind of, pull you out of it. But there'll be another child that remains nonverbal and may not be able to dress himself. And he's probably not going to get a job at McDonald's or a restaurant, but there's a lot of things that they can be taught to do. But autism's a big spectrum. So people tend to overgeneralize. Well, okay, let's start out with the fully verbal adults that are working at grade level or close to grade level. I cannot emphasize enough teaching working skills. That needs to be completed before they graduate from high school. Now you have an individual that's got more severe nonverbal. There are some nonverbal people that can learn to type independently. In fact, they when they describe what their life is like, they'll describe seeing is scrambled like a bad satellite TV. Hearing is like really bad internet connection where the voice is fading in and out. And one of the reasons why they touch and smell everything is those senses still work. So that's why they keep using those senses. And there's some really good books that you need to read, and I hope they can get translated into Portuguese. One is by Tito Macapadehe. How can I talk if my lips don't move? How can I talk if my lips don't move? And he describes a sensory disordered world. He types completely independently, but he is going to have to live in a supported environment. There's also the Japanese boy who did The Reason I Jump. And there's another book that's a sequel to The Reason I Jump, which I think gives a lot of insight. And so we need to be, let's give them a tablet with a text messaging program on it. for them to type on and put it in airplane mode so they can't send the messages. That's a very simple thing. Phones are probably too little, but there's lots of tablets around. I had a student that said, I don't have a laptop. And I said, if you look around, you'll find a laptop in somebody's basement or closet. Next day, she found a laptop. It was an old one, but it works. You know, the technology is around. I have been in Brazil, and you know, they'll keep the original iPhone going. They've got technology. That's one thing they've got. And
Verdade.
but it's a very, very big spectrum. And when they get older, there's a tendency to overgeneralize. And I'm seeing smart kids in the basement playing video games that should be out doing design work for a construction site, programming computers, just tech support for running these kind of meetings. A person with mild autism would be wonderful for making sure these Zoom conferences work. I'm just giving you examples of jobs that they would be good at.
Muito bem, a gente vai ter que entrar em contato com o Zoom para eles contratarem mais autistas. E Dr. Temple,
well, the Zoom manager has already hired lots of autistic people. They're just not labeled. And there's an interesting thing happening in the computer industry. And I have been to the major tech companies. I have been in their corporate headquarter buildings. And I've been in their dining rooms and cafeterias. No, half those programmers probably have some autism. But Silicon Valley parents, that's what we call our tech industry. We call it Silicon Valley. They teach work skills. They limit video game playing. And they teach programming at a young age. I'm seeing smart kids in math, and nobody's teaching them computer programming. Now, I'm not a computer programmer. I need to be taught drafting, art, or auto mechanics, equipment. And I've done a lot of engineering, the visual side of making equipment. In fact, a year ago, I visited a plant in Brazil, and they'd made a very nice piece of equipment there. And the person was a visual thinker like me, no engineering degree, and he was kind of apologizing for not having an engineering degree. And I said, you don't have to apologize. I took a picture of your piece of equipment. You know how to design things. It was a beautiful piece of equipment. And he was doing work for a lot of big meat companies, and he would simply show his portfolio. Well, here's this machine I designed, and this machine could not do math. There's kind of two parts of engineering.
Eu acho que isso, Dr. Temple, é uma das coisas interessantes também para a gente falar, que existe uma apreciação exagerada, talvez, a questão do diploma universitário, né? Aqui no Brasil, nós temos algumas escolas técnicas de excelente qualidade, mas que, por algum motivo, socialmente não são bem aceitas, não são valorizadas. E essas escolas técnicas, eu imagino, serem de excelente escolha para os jovens autistas, porque são mais práticas do que teóricas, né?
We have the same problem. In fact, this is the reason why I'm writing this book about visual thinking. Because the kind of skills you would learn for welding or auto mechanics or machinery design are not given enough credit. We have a huge shortage right now of welders and people that design equipment, people to fix equipment. I just opened up my MIT technology magazine and it was all about robotics and stuff. And I look at this and I go, somebody has to repair and fix all this stuff. Now, what I've seen in my industry is I have seen a person come in and get a job on the processing line, learn every job, then migrate over to the maintenance shop. 10 years later, this person without the college degree is building the new plant expansion. I have seen that. These technical skills are not given enough credit. Let me tell you something about a big food processing plant. I have worked with every major meat company in the US, every single one of them. And I've noticed a pattern on how they do construction projects. And the engineers with the university degrees, they will do the boilers, the refrigeration equipment, build the factory. They'll do the more mathematical parts of the job. But all the specialized equipment that goes inside, like a really fancy packaging machine, comes out as skilled trades. And what's happened in the US is we've lost the skills because people are not valuing it. We are importing poultry processing plant equipment and chicken and pork processing equipment from Europe, a high wage country, because we have lost the skills for the more skilled trades parts of engineering. The degreed engineers don't make the intricate packaging machine. Or you take your printer apart and you see all the mechanical things inside. That's usually not made by the degreed engineer. There's two parts of engineering. There's the mathematical engineering, and then there's the visual. I call it the clever engineering department. And what's happened is that people that ought to be inventing this equipment are in the basement playing video games. The people I worked with, they're retiring now. And all the people I worked with cannot do algebra. Absolutely cannot do algebra. They can do the old-fashioned math up through 6th grade the way it used to be taught. And so we don't have young people today starting little tiny shops, just like my colleagues did. They build something for a factory. The factory likes it. They build more stuff. 25 years later, they're building entire plants. I've been in industry. What I want to try to do is cross this divide between the industrial world. I actually love industrial stuff. But we're losing skills, and this is what my new book is going to be about. I am very concerned. We don't know how to make elevators. Now, in Brazil, you're making a lot of things. I have looked on the websites for your equipment, and some of these visual thinkers, somebody needs to expose them when they're 10 years old to tools. They need to grow up learning how to use tools, and they'll be inventing equipment. No, there's two parts of engineering, and the skilled trades side is not being taken seriously enough. The Steve Jobs Theater, okay, Apple, they got this really fancy theater with glass walls. It's beautiful. It's from Italy. I found the website of the company that made that. That's an example of losing skills.
Ah, concordo plenamente. E, Gustavo, eu acho que a gente tem uma pergunta um pouco agora focada nos autistas severos, né?
Isso. Quando a gente recebe, né, uma família que teve um diagnóstico recém-descoberto e tem esse indicativo de estar dentro do espectro e ser um caso severo, o profissional tem que fazer suas decisões ali, tomar suas decisões. Eu trabalho a comunicação, eu trabalho esta independência de tomar banho, trocar de roupa, ou eu trabalho habilidades acadêmicas. Se fôssemos escolher a primeira coisa que a gente deve trabalhar, qual seria o seu conselho, a sua dica para a gente?
Okay, first of all, I want to talk about age here. Little children, 2, 3, 4, I looked very severe. So your little children, you work really hard, and then they'll kind of separate out into severity levels. Okay, let's say this person is 10 years old, 12 years old. I want to try to teach basic skills. Bathing, showering. I call those the foundation of the house. I'm a visual thinker. That's the foundation of the house. And I want to teach academics that they could use in the practical world, because you can have somebody that's severe. I'm going to give you a specific example of a severe case. He was in an institution as an adult, an older adult, and one of our therapists took him out of the institution and taught him how to make coffee at the local gas station store. And this is a skill that other people appreciated. He was very careful about cleaning the coffee pots and making really good coffee. And for years, he was the coffee man of this gas station and truck stop. And people appreciated that. Then when he retired and he was in a nursing home, he still served coffee. You see, that gave him meaning in life. This was a nonverbal person. And when he got a job that gave him meaning in life. Now, there's others that might be too severe to do that. But there's a tendency sometimes to have too much emphasis in academics, because I've seen kids like me that, and I was a terrible student in high school, where they don't know how to go in a store and shop. I was at the airport and a girl came up to me. She was 13 years old, fully verbal, who had never shopped. She was with her mother. And some of these parents have trouble letting go. And I gave her a $5 bill, paper money, and I said, go in that shop over there and buy something. And she went over and bought a drink and brought me back the change. It was the first time that she had shopped. And that was, I don't remember which airport we were in, because I was in so many airports, and she did it. And the mom was surprised that she was able to do it.
É incrível. A gente, às vezes, realmente subestima a capacidade das nossas crianças, né? De poder desenvolver uma atividade, uma tarefa. E eu acho que para nós, como pais e mães de crianças autistas, é um desafio diário mesmo. E outra coisa, Dr. Grandin, que a gente percebe...
Okay.
Sim, go ahead. Pode ir adiante.
I just was saying, one of the things is when you first start to teach somebody, I'm not talking about 3-year-olds. I'm going to say older than 7 or 8. You are teaching them, like maybe to put on their jacket, for example, or some other task. When they're first learning it, it's going to take longer for them to do it themselves. So the parent has a tendency to put the jacket on for them. Or something simple like take out the trash. It could be, and you go, well, it's easier for me to just do it myself, or I could clean the bathroom. And you have to be willing to take the time to train them, and it is going to take time. And one of the things that the Japanese boy in the sequel to The Reason I Jump, I can never remember the title of that book. It's a weird title, like fall down 5 times, get up 6 times, is with numbers. And one thing that Noki, the little Japanese boy who's nonverbal, wrote in that book is that sometimes the people that his therapists would help him too much. And they wouldn't allow him to learn how to put on some of his clothes. And he described problems with controlling movement. He described himself as a broken robot where he couldn't control what his arms did. But a lot of these people want to learn. Also, nonverbal individuals know the difference between real work and fake busy work. Yeah, you want have them do something that's a real thing. Don't have them put the jacket on and off 5 times in a row. If it's cold weather, you put the jacket on before you go outside, and then when you come in, you take it off. That's the normal behavior. So you train on putting the jacket on when it's the time to put a jacket on.
Perfeito. E Temple, quando você no seu livro, escreveu no livro pensando em imagens, que está vendo aqui no Brasil em português, então Amazon, Mercado Livre, todo lugar tem. Você fala como aprendeu a transferir a sua concentração daquilo que está na sua mente para a atividade que você tem de desempenhar. Esse processo foi um treinamento para você. Como é que terapeutas, por exemplo, podem ajudar crianças a sair do mundo deles e vir aqui para a parte prática?
Well, that's one thing I had to do with when I first started building things. I just did carpentry work. And so I would go in the shop and build something and just make up the design. And when I went to steel and concrete work, I called it putting the shop on the paper. I had to build the thing in my mind and draw it on the paper. And I just kind of made myself do it. You know, sometimes there has to be a little have to. I'm on Zoom right now. I had to. You see, and the people that didn't learn the technology, they're going to be really miserable. There has to be a little bit of have to. You need to stretch these individuals. You don't push them into a noisy situation that they can't tolerate or a chaotic multitasking. Here's another bad job. Super busy, chaotic store at Christmas time. Another example of a really bad job. You don't push them into those kinds of situations. But if you don't stretch some, then you don't get any development. You have to stretch just outside the comfort zone. And another thing my mother always did is she gave me choices. I could do this or do that. But just sitting in your room alone, it's not one of the choices. But some of these individuals will need some breaks, sensory breaks, to calm down.
Sim, perfeito.
Eu vou querer ficar no mesmo tema aí do livro, tá, doutora? Nesse mesmo livro, é colocado que é como se simulasse em sua mente vários equipamentos, né? Como conseguisse fazer essa simulação. Eu imagino que é uma capacidade incrível, pensando na física, na engenharia, pessoas que às vezes precisam tomar uma decisão rápida e visualmente ali ter que entender o processo e aplicar, né? Como que isso acontece?
Well, I can visualize. Now, this is getting back to what I'm going to be writing about in my new book. I just went through the curriculum for the university curriculums for engineering, architecture, and what they call industrial design. Engineering is almost all math. Architecture is some math. Industrial design, almost no math. Now, a lot of the work that I've done is in the industrial design category. You see, there's two parts of engineering. And I didn't fully realize it until 3 years ago. I went into 2 big, huge, brand new pork processing plants. And all the equipment inside had come from Europe. And I realized we have a problem. Europe's a high-wage country. We don't make it anymore. And it goes back to taking out the skilled trades classes out of the high schools. Because then I went back and I made a list of projects that I did at big ranches, feedlots, and big meatpacking, big slaughterhouses. And I started listing some of the employees. This is something I just did a year ago. 20% of the welders and designers and drafting people I worked with would be in special ed today as children, either as autism diagnosis, attention deficit ADHD diagnosis, or dyslexic diagnosis. In the 1980s, I worked with a family that designed giant feed mills. They were all dyslexic. And they were building feedlots, feed mills, complicated feed processing equipment, lots of conveyors to bring the different feed ingredients to the mixer.
Muito bom, Temple. E falando um pouco sobre ainda a sua questão da mente, nós recebemos muitas perguntas da audiência. E uma delas foi como que você processa conceitos abstratos que fogem, digamos assim, de imagens, como, por exemplo, arte, música, religiosidade. Por exemplo, você acredita em Deus?
All right. Well, art to me is not abstract. I started seeing Picasso's art, Van Gogh's art. In other words, actual examples of art come up in my mind. Music, I start hearing different music. Religion, I'm seeing different churches. You see, if I can convert some of those things to a picture file. Also, my mind works bottom up. Verbal thinking is very abstract. I think about specific examples. Let's look at concepts like good and bad, for example. I do it with specific example. Now, some people on the autism spectrum are very black and white in their thinking. And But what you need to teach them is there's categories of good and bad. Stealing a candy bar from a store is less bad than killing somebody. You can put this in categories. Okay, robbing a bank where nobody was hurt would be in the middle, maybe between those two things. It's specific categories of good and bad. Well, one picture that comes to my mind are the two wallets that I returned at two different airports. That's maybe medium good. It's not Mother Teresa. Just being friendly and saying hello to somebody else is good. But I can see those wallets. I see those wallets right now. One of them was a money clip, and it was tumbling around on the X-ray machine conveyor. And I grabbed it and I gave it to the security guard. And the other one was in a bathroom.
E Temple, há uma pergunta que veio de muita gente. Você acredita em Deus? Você é uma pessoa religiosa?
Well, I have to have something I can see. You see my Hubble Space Telescope poster back there, and then I've got a picture of cattle back there too that I deliberately put there where they would show. And there's a picture called the Deep Space Field. And what the Deep Space Field shows is hundreds of galaxies. We're not alone in the universe. You got to think about the great questions. And the Deep Space Field has a very interesting background. There was a scientist who put in a proposal for viewing time on the Hubble Space Telescope to point it at nothing, at absolutely nothing near the Big Dipper. And people at NASA thought that was kind of stupid to waste the time looking at nothing. Well, it turned out when he looked at nothing, there was hundreds of galaxies out there. And I look at that when I think about life's great questions, and I've got cattle there because I really like them. But I have to have a picture. There's a great unknown. What's on all those galaxies? You can go online and type in Hubble Telescope Deep Space Field, and you can see that picture.
Vou fazer isso. Gustavo.
Doutora, você já falou da questão sensorial, auditiva, né? Pensando num outro foco sensorial, a parte gustativa, seletividade alimentar foi algo muito marcante na sua vida. O filme retrata isso, né? Como que é a sua alimentação hoje?
No, I eat most things. I eat most things. We need to try to prevent some of the picky eating. One of the ways to help, get over this is get the child involved with cooking and preparing the food, where the child can play with it. I think it's okay for a child to have 5 things they hate, and one for me is raw egg white. No, don't have to eat that. You can have the eggs, more hard. But I've seen kids where picky eating has gotten so severe that they may get vitamin deficiency diseases. Old-fashioned diseases like scurvy, pellagra, really bad. If a child is a picky eater, I'd strongly recommend a vitamin pill. There's insurance when they're eating such a restricted diet. Okay, I wanted to mention one other thing about religion. All religions have the golden rule. Treat others the way you want to be treated. That's in all religions. Teach it one specific example at a time. You don't hit other kids because you wouldn't like if they hit you. You share things because you'd like it if somebody else shared their game with you. That's the golden rule, taught one specific example at a time. You see, then you put those examples into categories. You see, it's bottom-up thinking. And what's interesting, it's the same way computers think, bottom-up, not top-down.
Temple, muito te ajudou também em todas essas questões sensoriais a máquina, a Squeeze Machine. Muita gente pergunta se você ainda tem ela. Eu já li que você já aposentou. Quando foi que você aposentou e por que você não precisa mais dela?
Well, about 10 years ago, it broke and I never got around to fixing it. So maybe I didn't need it anymore. But some individuals respond really well to deep pressure. And the movie shows the squeezing machine. And I got the idea from a cattle squeeze chute. It's used to hold cattle for vaccinations. And deep pressure relaxed me. And some other individuals might like a weighted vest or a weighted blanket, or they like tight garments, like those bicycle garments that they wear on racing bicycles. I would have liked those. You know, some kids like the tight garment, like the bicycle garment, or maybe a ballet leotard, and others like the looser weighted blanket, and some kids were going to hate it. You see, this is where sensory problems are very individual. But weighted blankets, weighted vests, and tight bicycle clothes are not expensive things. They're things you can try. Now, I still have problems with itchy clothes. I used to buy one pair of black pants that I really liked. Then the company cheapened the cotton and it was itchy. Now I hate that brand. Give children choices of clothing. Let them go in the store, feel it. And I have bought pants that I've had to give away. They felt okay in the store, but I'm sitting here at the computer now for 2 hours, or sitting on a plane for a long time, they just got really itchy where I couldn't stand. I've got to find things that don't itch. And again, give the child some choices of clothing. Let them feel them. Another tip is clothing that goes against the skin, wash it before wearing. That's underwear, t-shirts, pants. Wash them before you really start wearing them. Another little tip.
Doutora, tem muitos professores nos assistindo agora, né? E você colocou que, independente da abordagem, é importante ter um excelente professor ali, presente. Por um lado, nós temos políticas públicas, trabalhando a inclusão do aluno autista na rede educacional, mas você teve um professor que foi muito importante, o Mr. Carvalho, né? E o que você diria a esses professores que nos escutam hoje, que lidam com alunos autistas diariamente?
Well, I went to a normal school when I was for what we call kindergarten, when I was 5 through age 12. Small classes, I was fully included, but by the time I went into the first grade at 6, I was completely verbal. And I want to get, especially with young children, get fully included as much as possible. Now, if this had been a large class with 30 first graders or second graders or 10-year-olds, I would have needed an aide. But since there was only 12 kids in the class, I did not need an aide. Now, one of the mistakes I see made with an aide is there's a point where you have to wean the aide off, and they don't do it. Now, one of the things I do not want to see, this is something really bad. I'll give you a specific example. Brand new autism school. I saw a 12-year-old fully verbal kid who should have been in inclusion in with a whole bunch of other individuals much more severely impacted in with the nonverbals. And he was just looking up websites on a computer. This is a kid that needed to be having much more serious school. That's something I don't want to see.
A gente ouve falar muito de bullying, né? A gente sente na pele o que os nossos filhos passam na escola. Muitos autistas falam, né? Aqueles que conseguem expressar o que estão sentindo na hora, que o steaming ajuda a aliviar o estresse. Ao mesmo tempo, essas ações, elas deixam o indivíduo mais vulnerável ao bullying. O que a gente faz? Temple, a gente deixa a criança se expressar, a gente normaliza esse comportamento. Qual é a sua opinião? Onde encontrar o meio termo?
Well, the sensory issues are very variable. They go from just a minor problem to a very big problem. And people with the most severe sensory sensitivities are going to stim more. And there are some kids that need some sensory breaks where they can do it. I was allowed to stim after lunch in my room, I was not allowed to stim at the dining room table. You know, I think they do need to learn that there's some places where you don't do it, or you walk outside to do it. But these things are going to vary. And one of the things that helps on the bullying is if a child's really good at something like computer programming or maybe fixing bicycles, other people are going to appreciate that skill. Now, my elementary school explained, my really good third grade teacher when I was 8, explained to the other children that I had a disability that was not visible, like a wheelchair, and that the other children needed to be helping me. And so I managed to get up through age 12 with no bullying in this small school. Then when I went on to a big school, it was a mess. It was horrible. I was kicked out of school at age 14 for throwing a book at a girl who was calling me names. It was really bad. There's some individuals, and I was one of them, where a large high school did not work. Well, this is where I think the kid needs to be taking welding. Because right now, I've got a person I'm working with right now I know's on the autism spectrum, and he's building some stuff for us. And he's very good at what he does. Now, he's not been diagnosed. I was one of the kids that had to be taken out of a regular high school. Well, then let's try to teach the kid something he can do as a job. The math kids, I want to teach them programming, engineering. One mistake I see parents make is I'll see a family where the mom or the dad is a computer scientist, and they never thought to teach their child programming. You have a child that's 8 years old and he's good at math. Let's start teaching them programming. Let's start giving them college math books if you'd like to have them. Because the thing about autism in the fully verbal group is the uneven skills. Extremely good at one thing, extremely bad at something else. We need to be building up the strength, whether it's art, my kind of mind is going to be art, design, and mechanics, like fixing things, building machinery. Or it's a math mind. They're going to be doing computer programming, the more mathematical parts of engineering, like the boilers and the refrigeration. My colleagues we don't understand that stuff. I've seen that division of labor every single large meat processing plant I've been in the US. And I've seen that division of labor.
E é importante esses professores estarem sensíveis àquilo que a gente chama de hiperfoco e usar disso para ampliar o interesse para outras coisas ou até incluir aquele assunto que ele pretende ensinar para o seu aluno, imagino, né?
Well, on the hyper-focus, when I was 8, my ability in art became obvious. And I would draw the same horse head over and over again. Now you need to broaden it. You might have another child that loves a particular brand of car. Well, let's start learning about how cars work. If he's an art kid, let's draw different types of cars. Let's learn about their engines. If he's a math kid, we can learn about the computers that are in a car. In other words, I want to broaden it some, because I can't get employment just drawing horse heads. So my mother would say, let's draw the entire horse. Let's draw its saddle, its stable. Maybe we draw some places where we go riding. You see, that's broadening it. But I'm broadening it within the realm of art. I'm not going to teach the art kid calculus. That's for the math kid. But you have to broaden the skill some, because I have to draw things that other people actually want. And most people don't want horse heads and nothing else.
Temple, queria passar agora a falar um pouco sobre o filme, né, da sua vida. Eu já assisti a esse filme dezenas de vezes. Eu adoro ele. E você, como é que foi ver a sua vida sendo transportada ali para a tela, tendo os seus desenhos recriados, os seus projetos recriados, o trabalho com a Claire Danes? Como foi esse processo para você?
Well, I worked a lot with the producer. The producer of that movie, a lady named Emily Gerson Sains. She's the mother of an autistic child, and she'd read Thinking in Pictures years ago. And then she hired Mick Jackson, the director, who was very much a visual thinker. He hired Claire Danes. I spent a lot of time with Christopher Munger, the writer, and they did Claire Danes sort of became me. The first time I saw it, I went on a movie set, and it was sort of like a time machine back to the 60s and the 70s. She became me, and they duplicated all my projects. They showed how my visual thinking works. The way the visual thinking is shown is really accurate. They did a nice job showing my mother, my science teacher, Anne out at the ranch, really important people in my life. And Claire Danes took old videotapes of me, and she played them over and over again and practiced and became me. And I remember listening to a radio interview where Claire Danes was talking in the movie, and then I was talking in an interview, and I almost couldn't tell the difference. And then I recognized the lines.
Perfeito. E Temple, a gente assistindo em família essa semana aqui, o vídeo, meus pais, minha irmã veio com uma pergunta que, na verdade, muita gente faz. Porque a sua empatia pelos animais é indiscutível, todo mundo sabe. E muita gente se surpreende com o fato de você não ser vegana. Como é que você lida com a crítica, por exemplo, desse grupo de pessoas, dos vegetarianos, dos veganos?
Well, we have to give animals a good life. We have to give them a life worth living. I have a whole book about animal welfare. It's called Improving Animal Welfare, a Practical Approach. We've got to give them a good life. And that's absolutely essential. Also, none of the cattle or the chickens would be born otherwise. And I have some serious concerns in animal welfare. Handling's improving. Handling of cattle, that's improved. But I'm concerned, especially with poultry and with dairy cattle, pushing the biology too hard. We're pushing that dairy cow to be so productive that there's now problems with breeding her back. She has to have a calf every year to milk. We have problems with poultry with leg issues. Pushing the biology just too hard to produce, where that can cause lameness, difficulty walking. I have a lot of problems with that. I've also done a lot of thinking about grazing and cattle on the land. I've learned more about agronomy, and I'm finding out that some of the best cropland in my country was made by herds of grazing buffaloes, bison. And animals are part of the land. We use them right, they can improve the soil. We use them wrong, they can wreck the pasture. I'm a very big fan of integrating the animals and the agriculture, back together again, because that's going to be something that's truly sustainable.
Bem, nós estamos falando de terapia, de autismo, estamos falando de animais, eu não queria sair desse assunto. E se colocarmos essas duas coisas juntas, os animais podem proporcionar um ambiente terapêutico para as pessoas dentro do espectro do autismo?
Well, there are some individuals where service dog has been very helpful. Others where horseback riding programs have been really helpful. And there's kind of three ways that kids with autism react to animals. Just love them. Then another category is a little bit afraid of them at first, then they love them. And then there's a third category where there's a sensory problems with animals. They're afraid the dog might bark, and you can't control always when the dog barks. So maybe they don't like the smell of the horses, and then maybe it doesn't work. But animals are something that you need to try them. And so maybe somebody's thinking about getting a service dog. Well, maybe before you do that, you have a next door neighbor that's got a friendly Labrador retriever, and let's take the child over and see how he reacts to the dog. But the other advantage of having a dog is it helps to initiate socialization. Like right now with COVID, I go out for my walk every day. I've gotten to know the different dogs in the neighborhood and their owners. And we start having a conversation a dog is a good way to get conversation going. I think it's very important that we make sure we use the right dogs for service dogs. I was involved in a situation, I've done some consulting for airlines with animals. There was a very bad dog bite on one of our airlines. Very, very, very bad. Don't do something stupid and have something like that happen. Because then, I mean, I've been to the airport up until March 12th. I was living at the airport, seen lots of dogs at the airport, and there were no problems. They were just fine. And then one person has to do something really stupid and bring a dog onto a plane that should not have been there, and he chewed up another passenger's face. And so I want friendly dogs at the airport.
Temple, eu li um livro, eu já li todos os seus livros, mas eu li um livro diferente também, que foi um livro escrito por uma amiga sua chamada Anita Lesko. Se não me engano, é Temple Grandin, The Stories I Tell My Friends.
Yes, okay.
E muito interessante esse livro, porque ela mostra outro lado seu, que é, por exemplo, a sua relação com os seus alunos, que a gente sabe que você, inclusive, já pagou a educação de vários deles. E eu queria te perguntar sobre isso, sobre a sua rede de proteção. Os seus amigos, como é que é a sua relação com quem são as pessoas mais próximas a você? Um pouquinho de curiosidade aí sobre a sua rede de proteção.
Well, I have friends with people with shared interests. Now, they may have an interest in animals, an interest in building and engineering, or interest in autism. That's where most of my friends are, shared interests. Now, I care very much about teaching. I think teaching is very, very important. I have paid for 20 students that go through graduate school to get either their master's degree or their PhD degree. And I've been a professor at Colorado State University for 30 years. So I now have about 3 or 4 students now who have become professors. I've got students working in industry. I have a student that owns a farm. And I think helping the younger generation to succeed, that is a really important thing to do.
Então, essa parte que a gente precisa estar muito sensível a isso, né? Eu sempre falo para muitos pais que o consultório é um bom começo, mas não é um bom final. O trabalho que a gente chama de incidental no contexto natural, ele é fundamental em qualquer planejamento terapêutico, né, doutora?
Well, there's a tendency to get too much medical model in autism, where too often the person's becoming the diagnosis. Autism is an important part of who I am, but being a college professor and an equipment designer and somebody working with the cattle industry, that comes first. Autism is second. And I have a lot of young people that want to be autism advocates. And I tell them, you will be a better advocate if you can go get a job, keep it, and then tell other people on a spectrum how you got a job and how you kept it. And there's a tendency to over-shelter too much. I talked to one mom of a 16-year-old student doing very well in school, and I suggested that her child go in a store and buy something and do some shopping. He'd never gone shopping. And when I suggested this, she broke down and cried and said she could not let go. You know, that's not good, because the child isn't going to learn any skills.
Temple, a gente falando um pouco sobre, voltando ainda àquele assunto do filme, a gente como mãe se identifica muito com a Eustacia, sua mãe. Ela no filme mostra que ela sente muita vontade de receber o seu amor, o seu carinho de formas convencionais, como por exemplo um abraço. O que você diria para mães que hoje se questionam se o filho autista delas as ama ou não?
Well, I've gotten where I like to hug people, but now with COVID, we're not allowed to do that anymore. Last night, one of my next door neighbors they were working on fixing some bicycles, and he wanted to shake hands, and I'm going social distancing. I am an older person. I am at risk, so I'm going to talk to people, but we're going to stand 6 feet apart or 2 meters apart, their autistic kid will be loyal. If the house is burning down, they'll save you. He'll be the person that you're going to want to have there. He'll make sure you stay safe.
Eu acho que isso aí vale mais do que abraço convencional, né?
Well, the thing I said before, a brain can be more social emotional, where that's what is the important thing in their life, or a brain can be more thinking, problem solving, what's called cognitive. That's a fancy word for thinking. And there's a certain amount of variation that's just normal variation. And you need people in the world that like to do things. We all like this technology we're using right now. This technology came out of the autistic brain.
Temple, eu queria, a gente já estourou demais o seu tempo, mas eu queria fazer uma última pergunta, e eu acho que essa pergunta é muito especial.
Okay.
Você se emocionou quando o Oliver Sacks, que eu sei que você admira muito, escreveu: e se A e B e C tivesse sido diferente? Então, eu acho que todos os pais de autistas, eles já se perguntaram...
Sacks's writings, right? When he died, I remember sitting at this computer crying. And I was crying so hard. It's something an editorial he'd written in the New York Times that I couldn't even work the mouse right or the keyboard right. And he was kind of talking about the meaning of life. And I got very emotional about that. And he was talking about his life. And he lived a very full life right up until the end. And I got very emotional about that. You think about what is the meaning of life. Yesterday, somebody asked me a question. They asked me, what is the difference between the goal of a career and the goal of all your life? Well, a career would just be part of your life goals. There might be other life goals, but that's an interesting question. Now, usually for the autistic person who's successful, career usually's got a bigger proportion than some of the other things. But I was crying. I was crying so hard at this computer. I'm going, I couldn't even work the mouse anymore. And he was talking about what's the meaning of life. And I've got to thinking about that. And when I get an email where somebody says to me, my kid got a job because they read something in one of my books, that makes me really, really happy. Oh, I got one other thing I got to talk about. Driving.
Yeah.
If I had not learned to drive, I would not have had any job in the cattle industry. It's going to take longer. There's problems with multitasking. I drove 400 kilometers on dirt roads on my aunt's ranch before I did any traffic. We had to pick up the mail every day. And that was about 12 kilometers, the total round trip to pick up the mail. Take longer. Practice in totally safe places, big parking lots, abandoned fields, deserted office parks. During COVID, nobody's in the office parks. Good place to practice driving. They're going to need a lot more practice to get that driving into what's called motor memory, where you don't have to think about it, and then you very carefully go into traffic. No, they do need to learn to drive, but you're going to take more time and do it more slowly, because that really opened up my life. And what is the meaning of life? The things you do help make the world a better place. I'm very much, it's important to me that, that I've helped my students. It's important to me that, I get in these emails and the parent says it's something I recommended worked. That makes me really happy.
Eu tô emocionada aqui.
Extremamente emocionado, estou extremamente tocado.
Muito emocionada. Tempo, eu não tenho palavras para dizer. Para te agradecer de você estar aqui com a gente e te desejar Gustavo.
Ela faz o aniversário, a gente que ganha o presente, né? Obrigado.
Okay, well,
Exatamente.
Thank you so much for having me on this program. And I hope I'm going to be able to help some of these kids, just do everything that they can get out and have a good life, get out and do things, and
Happy birthday!
And okay,
Happy birthday!
I got a birthday
Long
from my
life.
student last night. My students last night gave me some. We got these. Cheryl, my assistant, brought over some little cupcakes, and we put candles on them, and had a little party outside in this little structure we call a gazebo. Which I've been,
Você merece comemorar muito. Merece comemorar muito. Temple, thank you so very much.
Well, thank you very much.
Fala em breve.
It's absolutely wonderful being here.
Bom, ficamos muito felizes em ouvir.
Have to leave
Speak
now.
soon.
But thank you so much.
Happy birthday.
Okay, thank you.
Bye.
Obrigado.
Bye.
Obrigado, de coração.